Hello, I'm Toycat, and welcome to what is going to be my first ever 15-second long video, because what is the largest lake in the world? I have the answer, and it is the Caspian Sea. Wait, the largest lake in the world is called the Caspian Sea? That is correct. If you look at the Caspian Sea and combine it to all of the other largest lakes in the world, none of them really even come close. You could argue Lake Superior, Lake Victoria, or Lake Michigan sort of do, but add all three of them together and they're nowhere near the size of the Caspian Sea, which, need I remind you, is actually a lake. How is it possible that the largest lake in the world is called a sea? Well, as it turns out, the name, the Caspian Sea, is one of those things that dates back to when we considered a sea just because of its size and saline, salty water. However, it actually embodies most of the characteristics of lakes. Much of the confusion comes because there's no internationally agreed upon definition for seas or lakes. The rough one we tend to use for sea is that it has a connection directly to the ocean or to the ocean via another sea, and salt water is usually the thing that you get from that. If the water is salty, it probably connects to an ocean, but the Caspian Sea is a really weird example because it has no connection to a sea of any other type besides, perhaps you could say itself because it's the Caspian Sea. There's no connection to the sea, however, it is still salty. In fact, this salt is even more interesting when you dive into it because apparently there is a serious problem with the fact that the salt in there is actually very different to the ocean salt. It's a different compound, and this actually means that it results in one of the most geographically diverse regions because it has unique qualities according to the World Wildlife Fund at least. And so yeah, there is a sea in the world that is actually not a sea, but it's a lake, and it's so much bigger than every other lake. In fact, if you look real closely here, you can see okay, so the Caspian Sea is, actually, let's just take a look at this graph. This is what they look like when you place them on land. This is the Caspian Sea, which is a lake, and here are all of the other lakes around the world. They have nothing on this. However, the immediate question I have, because when you look at a map, you can see this is the Caspian Sea, this is the Black Sea. Both of them are clearly inland bodies of water, and so why is the Black Sea not considered bigger? And actually, the Black Sea is considered bigger. It has 436,402 kilometers squared of area, whereas the largest lake is just 371,000 kilometers squared, because the Black Sea is not a lake, but is in fact distinctly a sea. In fact, this is where things get kind of funky, because the Mediterranean Sea is actually it's called a sea and not a lake, because even though it looks a lot like it's a lake, it has this small little Strait of Gibraltar that connects it to the ocean, and that's what causes it to be salty there. And then, interestingly enough, this sea then has the tiniest of connections to the Black Sea right here, which means that the Black Sea does directly filter in and out of a ocean, or I guess very indirectly, because the Black Sea goes in and out of the Sea of Marmara, which has a small passage going to the Aegean Sea, which, if you go between all of the islands, leads you to the Mediterranean Sea, which, if you go through the Strait of Gibraltar, eventually takes you out to the main ocean, which is enough for it to be salt water as opposed to fresh water. There's an interesting argument about, well, if we took this and we closed this passage off entirely, first of all, where would Europe and Asia end? But second of all, if we closed off this passage entirely, would the Black Sea then become a lake? But we haven't done that yet, and so the answer to why the Black Sea is a sea is because this body of water gets its salt from somewhere over there, and so that is the weird world of lakes versus oceans. However, this question is actually kind of interesting to answer. Because lake is not officially internationally agreed upon, you could argue that having saltiness, no matter where it comes from, even if it's this weird different salt that might come from some long past history, you could argue that the Caspian Sea is not a sea. And so what is the largest lake in the world? Well, that would, what's the largest freshwater lake in the world? What's the largest lake that is not a sea in the world? The answer is Lake Superior. It's literally superior. It's the biggest lake in the world. Except actually, well, is it the biggest lake in the world? Well, there's an interesting argument that actually we can argue that Lake Baikal is the biggest lake, because although it has less surface area, it actually has the largest reserves, the largest volume of fresh water. And why would we care about the surface area of a lake? Surely if a lake is defined by the water within it, we should define it by the amount of water in there. And so Baikal, which is a relatively small lake, relatively small in the size of the Caspian Sea, is found over It's found over here. It's in Siberia, so it's pretty hard to get to, you might say. And there's an interesting controversy around it because apparently there was a Chinese firm that wanted to like take the water, bottle it, and sell it back to China. And apparently a lot of people in the area weren't so happy with that and said, "Hey, I don't think you should export 190 million liters of our lake water to China." Although if you think about it, 190 million liters sounds like so many until you realize that like there's 5,670 cubic miles. What does a cubic mile of water look like? Can you imagine that? Let's do a little scale comparison to like a house real quick. They have 5,670 of those. A kilometer cubed is just as confusing. It has so much water that it starts to make you question what's even going on there. It's also the world's deepest lake. It goes 1.6 kilometers deep. That's how many times deeper than the tallest building on the planet? Like several times deeper. It's also the world's oldest lake. And so yeah, Lake Baikal, if you are going to go with the water as the definition, clearly should be the biggest lake in the world. It's like the population versus land area of a city. Which do you care about in a city? Do you care about the size that it technically covers? Or do you care about the people in it? Because cities are kind of defined by the people inside of them, and lakes can be defined by the water. Except even if we try to argue that like, oh, okay, so lakes, we're going to say freshwater, we're going to say surface area, because we like looking at maps, and the thing that takes the most space on the map is the thing that gets us here. And, you know, the Hudson Bay, even though it's a bay, it's a sea, and the Lake Superior is clearly the biggest lake, and so problem solved. Except actually, is it problem solved? Because, as you might have guessed from my accidental showing you this a little earlier, Lake Michigan Huron, is it Huron? Huron? You know, I'm not I hear Americans actually have to learn the names of all the lakes. The Great Lakes. You know, they're okay lakes at best. How about that? Gonna take a shot at your education right now if you were educated in North America. But the thing is, Lake Michigan Huron is actually the largest freshwater lake in the world if you count them as one lake. Should you count them as one lake? Well, if you look on a map right here, you can see that like, well, I mean, you know, here is Lake Michigan, here is Lake Huron. You can see that they go through this little thing right here, which again, just to clarify, this bridge doesn't go through the water and block it off. It is above the water, so imagine the bridge isn't there, like geologically speaking. Why is this a separate lake to this? Why do we say that just because it's a relatively narrow gap? And by the way, when we say relatively narrow gap, we're talking about 5.82 kilometers. That's 362,000 barrels of oil for Americans listening. So you know, like 5.82 kilometers across. It's like, I mean, you know, is that really enough to say two separate, distinct you know, lakes right there? Because, you know, admittedly, we use basically the same logic to say that this is the Sea of Marmara, this is the Thracian Sea, and this is the Aegean Sea, and this is the Black Sea. Is this a separate sea? The Sea of Azov. Why is the Sea of Azov separate to the Black Sea? And so you could argue that, like, yeah, well, of course we have to separate these two lakes. They're so big by comparison to the size of the lake, because that might be only 5 kilometers across, but Lake Michigan is so big that it crosses multiple states. Look at that, it's 117 kilometers across. But then we're going to argue, like, well, when does a strait stop being a connection between two lakes and start being a whole interesting thing by itself? Also, I just realized this is the bridge that connects Michigan to the top half of the state, you know, the weird half of the state. Also, I just realized that there's a national forest in Michigan called the Ottawa National Forest. What is the story behind that? Why is it named after the Canadian capital? Is there a fun... You know, okay, so this is the problem with lakes, right? This is the problem with questions like, what is the largest X in the world? Is as humans, we have a really hard time defining what anything is. Like, what's the largest country in the world? Well, what do you define as a country? What do you define as large? What do you define as any... And so, honestly, when it comes to lakes, we just have to say, what is the largest lake in the world? It's something we don't even call a lake. And if you don't want to call that a lake because you think that if I can't drink the water, side note, don't drink the water in lakes. If I can't drink the water in the lake, then is it really a lake? Terrible definition, but if that is you, then clearly you should say Lake Michigan Huron is the largest lake in the world, unless you're saying, well, actually, I need it to not have a strait in there. If it gets too narrow, I count it as two separate lakes. Then you've got to say it's Lake Superior, except if you're judging it by the water, you've got to say that the Russians win this one with Lake Baikal right here. And you know what? If you're going to judge it by volume, what if again, it's a hilariously tiny amount, but would you say that if you drain the water out of that lake, it stops being so big? Because here's a fun fact, a lot of the largest lakes that previously have existed, if we go, everyone knows about the Ural Sea, right? But it's not just the Ural Sea, we've mostly the Aral Sea. Am I having like a Berenstain moment? I swear it was called the Ural Sea. But the Aral Sea is a sea that was mostly drained. You can see boats just docked on nothingness anymore because the water drained away from them. But there's other examples of this. Lake Urmia used to be the 29th biggest lake in the world, and you know what Iran did to it? They mostly got rid of it. It shrunk. It lost 59/60ths of its water. 98% of its water is gone. Is it still a lake? Naturally speaking, without humans, there would be a lake there. But if there's no water, can you still have a lake? You know, if we drained all of the water out of the Caspian Sea, would it still be a sea? Is it a sea? Or, you know, I don't know what these questions lead you to. So I wanted to take a little diversion because, like I said, I like these videos to be about some of the things I found out while dicking about on Google Maps. And so one of the things I was learning, because I was in the Lake District recently for a video where I climbed the tallest mountain to beat Minecraft. Long story on that one, but I was on the tallest. I was in the tallest mountain in the UK, and I found that the biggest lake was nearby. As it turns out, we have something called the Peak District in the UK. Again, you'd figure the biggest peak would be in the Peak District. The biggest peak is in the Lake District, but also so is the biggest lake. And so I was like, this is like relatively small for a really big lake. I'll show you the view I roughly had. I was like, well, it's like, this is not the view I had. I don't know where this is in the world, but it's not the correct place. Anyway, so I was looking out the lake, and I was like, you know, for the biggest lake in England, this is like not a very big lake. Admittedly, I just haven't seen many lakes, mostly because I live in England, maybe. So I decided, like, okay, I got home, and I was planning a future trip to Northern Ireland, you know, my something heritage or something. And I was like, you know, wow, Loch Ness is so big. It's so big, it seems like it causes an inconvenience to the Northern Irish Travel Network. And I was like, I wonder if Loch Ness is the biggest lake in the UK, or if it's a Scottish one. And so I did the little Google search, and as it turns out, Loch Ness? Yeah, it's definitely Loch Ness. I've got really good Irish Gaelic pronunciations. I actually study them before these videos. So Loch Ness is a... Oh, that sounds like, you know, like, oh, what's up, my Niegas? You know, like I feel like we're diving into some dangerous territory by pronouncing it that way. So this loch right here is 5.5 times bigger than the next biggest lake, which is Loch Lomond. Funnily enough, Loch Ness is the third biggest lake, and basically all of the biggest lakes in the UK aren't called lakes because we use the Scottish loch term or the Irish loch term, but we spell loch with a G and a H for some reason. And I think that's absolutely hilarious, personally. The biggest lakes in the UK aren't called lakes because, you know what? Life is just filled with things that are labeled misleadingly. You know, I think at the start of this video, I claim to be educating you, but all I've told you is facts that tell you that everything you know is a lie. Do you think you know what the biggest lake in the world is? You don't. You probably didn't. Do you think you know what all the lakes, the Great Lakes are? Well, you do. Okay, wait, actually, this is my chance. So there's 5 Great Lakes in America. 4 Great Lakes in America. So there's 4 to 5 Great Lakes in America, and here is the way you can remember the names of them. Lisa likes licking lettuce lightly will help you remember that it's Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. I really want to know. You know, here's the other weird thing, right? So Scotland is filled with big lakes. Like, England is just this big landmass. Scotland, you can look at it and it's like, man, it's very lakey, very locky going on over there. But the other weird thing about Scotland I was wondering is, like, you know, are these, you know, some of these, like, lakes look a lot like fjords. Although this is part of the sea. You know, this is called a loch, but it's clearly not a lake, right? This drains right into the sea. Why is it still called a loch? I'm gonna have to look that up right now. Okay, you know what? I don't like that at all. Loch Fionn, is it called? Loch Huron. Okay, so Loch Huron is this? It's a sea. Why do we call the seas lakes and the lakes seas? Why? Why was it ever called a lake? Is it fresh water at least? It better be fresh water. Loch Huron, fresh water. Let's find out. It is a sea. But does it... You know, you gotta give me the answers here. It's sometimes described as the most fjord-like of the sea lochs of northwest Scotland. You know, just tell me, is it fresh water or is it salt water? Is that an answer? If it's sea, then it's gotta be salt water, right? So why did we call it a loch? What was our logic? Did we not know where it led? You know, I'm not gonna claim, you know, this Scottish people like to be separate, and you know, for this case, that's on you, Scotland. Why is this Loch Horn? Why is this Loch Huron? Why do you name your seas lakes? Because loch is, if I'm not mistaken, loch is the Scottish word for sea. Sorry, the Scottish word for lake. Actually, clearly, loch is the Scottish word for sea, and then they just incorrectly called Loch Ness over here, you know, like Sea Ness, when it's actually a lake. Anyway, so, I'm mad about that. You know, this was meant to be a video where I'm like, aha, you're the ones who learn nothing. I'm the one who's mad now. Okay, so my last point is I was looking in Scotland, and you can see all these lakes that look a lot like fjords, and so I was curious, like, you know, are these things called fjords? Because Norway looks very fjordy. Is Scotland fjordy? As it turns out, there's 111 large fjords in Scotland. There is, oh, here's a map. Wait, this channel, we can be about maps again. Okay, let's find out. This is not a map. Is this a map? Here we go. This is a channel about maps one more time. If you'll find out, Scotland officially has lots of... This is the most useless... See, this is why this channel... You know, some people say, like, you just show maps, Toy Cat. Can you understand this map? Do you understand it perfectly? Because I do, and I'm not going to tell you what... I know what partially seismic means in this context. And, yeah, I think this is fascinating. You know, this kind of proves the point that the further north in the UK you get, you know, like, northern UK is like southern Scandinavia. That's maybe why we're such good friends. We have fjords and we have questionably named things. And what more do you need in life? But yeah, if you wanna help me out, because you know I'm gonna Google it just after this video, but like I might forget because I'm gonna have to do a whole outro where I say, hey, you considered subscribing and you know giving me money for merch or something. But you know before I do that, can someone tell me why the Ottawa National Forest is a thing? You know, I should spend more time looking at random states, clearly. You know, tell me your secrets, Ottawa National Forest. Is it actually a Canadian forest? Is this Canada? Did I just not realize? Also, you know, I have covered this before and it is kind of strange. The way America and Canada divided the Great Lakes, it leaves something to be desired, right? Can we all agree on that? Anyway, so this is Visit the Ottawa. I mean, clearly I should visit the Ottawa. And, you know, I'm not going to think about it too much. I'm going to visit the Ottawa someday, but that day is not today. You know, it's quite far from Ottawa too. Like, there's Ottawa National Park in the wrong nation. I hope there's a Washington National Park in... Actually, you know, is there a Washington National Park? There's one in Washington. There's one in Man, you know, I don't mean Washington the state. I mean Washington in Canada. How don't you know that, Google? Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Hope you found it fun, or educational, or fun and educational. Funjucational. I'm just kidding. This was valueless content. I hope that you enjoyed watching a dude goofing up. You know, this isn't even a real green screen. It's not even evenly lit. You don't even know what quality content is, and that's why you watch these videos. You've got bad taste, and I hope that I never see you again. Second channel, don't care. Can I say that at the end of my videos? I can. Second channel, don't care. Bye. There's no like way off camera here. I just have to walk towards the wall and hope it looks like I walked off. High quality. Can I?